Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I have my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio. And Dad, I'm excited about today's show. We have a very exciting guest. We're just going to bring him on and get started right now. We have Maxime Bernier on. He is the leader of the PPC, everybody, the People's Party of Canada. Maxime, we're excited to have you on the show. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be with you today.
We're excited to have you too. Maxime, we're just going to get right into some of the questions that we want to know from you. We know that you ran, I think, in 2021. Now you're running again. How is this time different than what you've done in the past? What are you seeing?
Yes, actually, the general election in Canada in 2021 was a lot about the COVID hysteria. And as you may know, at that time, we were the only national political party that was speaking about freedom, freedom of choice with an informed consent. We were against these draconian measures that the federal government did impose on us during COVID-19. And, that was the main subject of that campaign. And this year, this general election, for us, the main subject is mass immigration. When I started to speak about that in 2019, I said we need to have fewer immigrants, a maximum of 150,000 a year. But the federal government did the opposite, and we opened our doors to a lot of immigrants. Actually, last year, it was 1.3 million foreigners coming to our country. And this is mass immigration when you are a country of 40 million people. So at that time, it was not that popular to speak about that. But right now, this election, for us, the main subject is mass immigration. And actually, for the fake conservative, the Conservative Party of Canada, that is only conservative in name, like the Rhino, Republican in name only in the US. They don't want to speak about that. For them and the Liberals, it's all about, the tariffs and the counter tariffs and the commercial war against the US. For us, we can be able to have a good deal with President Trump, but the most important is to stop that mass immigration. It is destroying our country. Our standard of living is going down, and also it is having a big impact on the social fabric of our country.
I heard the rumor, and I don't know if it's true, that the Canadian government will accept immigrants who are not citizens into the military. Is that true?
It is true. It is true. It is sad. It is the reality. They're not Canadians, and we will ask them to defend our country. I believe that we are the only Western country who is opening the door to foreigners to be part of our Canadian forces. And actually, also, we must not forget that the big majority of these foreigners coming to our country are coming to a third world country in Africa, in Asia, and a lot of them don't share our Canadian values. So it is a problem. It is a big problem.
So if I understand this correctly, the Liberal government will take away guns from citizens, but give guns to non-citizens who join the military.
You're absolutely right. And Carney, during this campaign, the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, said that he wants more control on guns. That means that, the law-abiding and peaceful gun owners, they will have more confiscation of their guns. They call that a buyback program, but it is a confiscation. They don't respect property rights for a gun owner. That's our country, but like in the US, it is part of our history and our culture. But for the Liberal government, and for the conservative, they're afraid to speak for gun owners because they're afraid of the reaction coming from the mainstream media. As you know, in Canada, we don't have a Fox News. We have mainstream media that are leftist, and Poilievre is afraid, and he doesn't want to speak about that. But for us, we are there to defend gun owners and to be sure that their right will be respected.
You brought up immigration. I wanted to ask, how would your party, the PPC, handle that in Canada? We see what our neighbors in the South are doing. We see what Trump's doing with the Trump gold card, for some of those people. We see the mass deportations. How would you guys handle what's happening in Canada?
Yes, so we will have a moratorium on immigration, a pause on immigration, no more immigrants for a couple of years. The time to solve the challenges that we have because of mass immigration. As you may know, we have a housing crisis in our country. It's very difficult for young couples to be able to buy a house. And we need to solve that. It's a question of supply and demand. We need to cut the demand to have that pause on immigration. And at the same time, our proposal is to deport the illegals who are in Canada. And there's a lot of them. The federal government told us that it's between 50,000 illegals to 500,000, but they don't know the exact number. We need to put our resources there. And an illegal is a person that is coming to our country under a permit, like, for example, international students. But after that, when you have your diploma, you must leave the country and go back to your country of origin. But these fake international students are coming from India. They don't want to leave the country after that, and they want to stay here. The conservative and the liberals are telling them, you don't respect our legislation, but we will give you a nice gift. You'll be able to have a permanent residency. For us, it's a wrong signal that we are telling them, and they must leave the country, so they must be deported. And same thing for the temporary foreign workers. They're supposed to be here temporary, but they're not leaving the country, so they're illegals. And we need to put our resources there to know how many of them, where are they, and to find them and to deport them. But the conservatives and the liberals won't speak about that. They are pandering to these ethnicity because you have a lot of ethnic ridings across the country where they control the majority. So they want to have these seats. And so they're pandering to them and telling them what they want to hear. But for us, we are telling them, if you don't respect our legislation, you need to be deported. And that will be part of our program.
As you know, in this time period, we're having a situation with the West. And the West wants out and is tired of being the money bag person in the country, but not getting any listening ear from Ottawa on what's going on out here in the West. And this election is very crucial because if certain people get elected, there's going to be an uprising out here in the West, particularly in Alberta, like we've never seen before. What is your feeling about the West, equalization payments, all of this kind of thing when it comes to a province that doesn't have equal representation in Ottawa?
You're right about that. I was in Alberta a couple of days ago, and I can tell you, Albertans are right. They're fed up with the politics in Ottawa. They're fed up that the Conservative and the Liberal Party are pandering to Ontario and Quebec. And actually, I told them, that don't vote for the Conservative Party of Canada. They are taking your vote for granted. You are voting Conservative, but for Poilievre, he won't do anything about the equalization payments. And you're right about that. The federal government is giving $26 billion every year for the equalization payments, money coming from Western Canada, and that is going to Eastern Canada. And Poilievre won't speak about that. He's okay with that formula that is unfair. And actually, like Harper, when he was prime minister, he did increase the payments for the equalization formula to be more generous to Quebec. And Poilievre is not speaking about that. And that's a very important point for the unity of this country. Our proposal is to change the equalization formula to be drastically less generous And our proposal is to cut that by half. So instead of $26 billion, that must be only $13 billion. And like that, you'll give the right incentive to provinces like Quebec, my own province, and Alberta, Quebec and New Brunswick, to develop their own natural resources. Because as you may know, in Quebec, there's a lot of shale gas, but the Quebec government put a moratorium on the exportation of shale gas, because if they're doing that, the province would be richer and they will receive less money from the equalization formula. So that's important. We need to be less generous and change that to have a formula that would be fair for every province. And at the same time, there's also all that climate emergency. And, we are saying that we must withdraw from the Paris Accord. But for the conservative and the liberals, they won't. Actually, they will spend billions of dollars for a new technology called carbon capture. They want to capture CO2 and put it in the ground. But CO2 is not a pollutant. It is a gas essential for life. And there's a natural technology to capture CO2. It is plants and trees. So the conservative and the liberals share the same platform about the climate change and being part of the Paris Accord and the net zero in 2050. So for us, it's important for Western Canada, but also, for every province, we will withdraw from the Paris Accord. So I'm telling to Western Canadians, I understand. So if you're serious about separation and separatists, and you want to have your own country, or you want to be the 51st state, be serious about that. I'm the only national politician that is telling you, you must have a referendum at the provincial level for that, because right now, the liberals and the conservative are not taking you seriously. And because of that, your province cannot be more prosperous, and it's unfair for you. So our proposal is to have radical decentralization in Ottawa, is to give more autonomy to every province, including Alberta. And what is good for Quebec must be good for Alberta. Albertans want, to control their police force. That must be okay. They want to have their own pension plan. That must be okay. They want to control their environment policy. That must be okay. So if the platform of the People's Party is not adopted, I don't see a bright future for this country. And I will tell, if you have a referendum in Alberta on the secession or the separation, I will be there with you, and I will tell you, vote yes. It's the only way to put pressure on the federal government. If the federal government is not listening to you, have a referendum, vote yes, and you'll have more power to negotiate a better deal with Ottawa. And the best deal with Ottawa, it is the fact that we must respect our Constitution. Because the federal government is not doing that, we have that, unity crisis. But for Poliev and Carney, there's no crisis there. But I must add also in Quebec, in my own province right now, the young charismatic leader of the PQ, the Parti Québécois, is ahead in the polls right now. And in Quebec, we'll have an election in 2026. And he said to Quebecers, if you vote for the PQ, it's a vote for a referendum. And I will have a referendum a year after my election. Why? Because of mass immigration. Because of mass immigration in Quebec, it is very important and must be important all across the country. They want to preserve their language, their culture, and we are seeing people coming to Quebec who don't speak French or English, and they don't integrate into our society. So because of that, now the separatist sentiment in Quebec is very high, like in Alberta. So yeah, if we don't do anything, something can happen in this country. That's why we need to, I'm saying to Albertans, vote for the People's Party, vote for what you believe. And we are the only hope for the country. And, we can save this country. Send a strong signal to Ottawa and to the conservative that enough is enough. and we can grow our percentage of the vote. We can make history and having our first and maybe more candidates elected at this election. And we will speak for every province in Parliament. So that's a very concerning time in Canada for the unity and also for the prosperity of the country.
I don't want to be a pessimist, Max A, but one of the things that has bothered me a little bit here in Alberta, in my constituency, for example, in Calgary, there is no signs for the People's Party of Canada. And I got a hold of the lady that is my representative, and she basically says there's no money. She doesn't have the money to have enough signs. So she chose a couple of the communities where she was able to put up signs, but in ours, it wasn't there. So I guess, if we see the People's Party of Canada get elected and have good representation here in Alberta, it's only because of Almighty God and not because of the signs.
Yeah, but speaking about that, you're right. The Conservatives and the Liberals will spend about $35 million in that election. If we spend as a young new political party $1 or $2 million, that would be the maximum. We are growing as a party, but we are fiscally responsible. This party, never had any deficit. We don't have any debt. We have money in the bank. We are spending the money that we are raising. We're very fiscally responsible. And, I'm telling our candidates, if you raise money, spend the money that you raise. And the head office or cannot help every candidate all across the country. But in Alberta, as you may know, at the last election, we had 10% of the vote on average in Alberta. If you compare that with our national average, that was 5%, and we have very good candidates in Alberta. And I believe that, we can have some of them that will win if, the conservative voters are voting in line with their values. So that's another challenge because we don't have the same amount of money for the advertising, but also add to that the mainstream media is ignoring us. It's like we don't exist. That's why I'm very pleased to be with you today. And that's why I did a lot of podcasts in US and in Canada. Our message is very strong. And, I know that we will win that battle of ideas. It's a question of time. And I strongly believe that our time can come at this election. Actually, 40% of the population didn't vote at the last election. The participation rate was only 60%. And I believe that people who don't vote is because they're looking at these establishment political parties and they're saying it's all the same. I don't want to vote for them. And maybe they don't know that we exist. We can have the support of these people. And that's why I'm telling Canadians, go out and vote. It's important to express your point of view and try to have all these non-voters to come and vote for the People's Party.
Yeah. Well, what I appreciate about you, Maxime, is you have done things much different than a lot of the other leaders, and I really appreciate that. You have been on Tucker Carlson's show and other big podcasts like Alex Jones and all that kind of stuff. You're mixing it up. I think that's great. Where I was disappointed is we didn't get to see you debate. And I think that's wrong. I think everyone should have been able to be in that room, have a great conversation, have a debate. If you could have been at that debate, what items and topics would you have brought up and how would you have challenged them that really kind of show the lack that their party has and some of the items that are important to Canadians?
Yeah, like I said before, immigration, why are you for mass immigration? And Polyev, actually, he said that he's okay with 250,000 foreigners in our country every year, plus, the international students, plus the temporary foreign workers, plus the refugees. That means about 1.5 million foreigners over 2 years. That is mass immigration. And by doing that, is importing cheap labor in Canada for Walmart and Tim Horton. It's we need to work for Canadians, and that's not good. If Tim Horton or Walmart are not able to have employees, maybe they just have to raise their offer and giving a better salary, and they will have Canadians that will work for them. them young Canadians or semi-retired Canadians. That being said, immigration won't solve that, and we need to stop that. But also the other point that I will raise, it's the deficit and the debt. Now we know that with the conservative, that would be 4 years of deficit. Same thing with the liberals. Money is not falling from the sky. It's that they are creating money out of thin air with this deficit. We'll have, the deficit of today or the taxes of tomorrow. We'll have more taxes or we will pay more inflation. We are paying right now the deficit of the COVID-19 hysteria when the federal government told us, stay at home, don't do anything, we'll give you money. They created the biggest deficit in the history of our country, and now we are paying the inflation tax. So the conservatives are not conservative. They are not ready to balance the budget in 1 year. And our proposal is to do that. And we can, the deficit of this year will be $40 billion. And our cuts are about $56 billion. So in the first year, we can balance the budget and having surplus that we'll use to lower taxes to Canadians. But for the Liberals and the Conservative, they are telling us that they are giving a tax break. But at the end, when you do that by deficit, it's not a permanent tax break. It is only temporary. We will have to pay for that in the future. So, and also the other points is the tariff. Polyev is okay, and Harper, also my former boss, wrote a letter in the National Post about 4 months ago, and he said, maybe the sovereignty of this country is at risk. We don't want to be the 51st state, so that's why we need to impose counter tariffs, dollar for dollar. We know that it will hurt us, and we may be in a recession, but that's okay. So what he's telling Canadians, and you know that Harper is the one that is giving advice to Polyev, what is saying Canadians? Counter tariffs are good. No, it is a tax. It is a tax. We are paying that 25% more. All the imports coming from the US will have 25%. So it's a tax that we are paying, we Canadian consumers. And he's saying, we love you so much, Canadians, that, we will tax you more and you may lose your job, but that's okay. That's crazy. Our proposal is no counter tariff. The US is 10 times bigger than us. You cannot win a trade war. We need to reopen that free trade agreement and put everything on the table. But for Carney and Polyev, that's not the case. They want to protect the dairy cartel in milk, poultry, and eggs. And if they're doing that, we won't have a deal with President Trump. President Trump tweeted 3 times on X that is not happy with the 300% tariffs that we are imposing on milk, dairy, and eggs, that they cannot they cannot sell these products in Canada. So we need to put that on the table to be able to have a deal, but also for Canadian consumers, prices will go down, and but Carney and Polyev are saying, no, we will protect them. By doing that, they won't be able to have a deal. So, my goal would have been to expose the Conservative and the Liberals and to show to everybody that they are the same. That's why Polyev is not winning right now. If you look at the polls, and I believe he won't be able to win because he's not a real Conservative. So I'm telling to Western Canadians, don't waste your vote with Polyev. Wake up and smell the coffee. Carney will win. Look at the polls. He will win. He will have a majority. Now you can vote for the People's Party to be sure that, our ideas will be in Ottawa debated and will fight for you, Western Canadians, and all Canadians.
Well, I think you just did expose them. Maxime Bernier, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate you. Good luck on the election, and we'll definitely do a follow-up to talk to you a little bit about how you think it went, and we really appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you for giving me that time. Have a nice day.
Well, Alan, it's great to have Maxime Bernier on, and fascinating guy. I love what he's talking about. I really love kind of what they've been doing. What do you think?
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to talk to him about abortion, but we did talk to him off the air, and he wants to have a discussion of abortion. He doesn't believe that we should be killing babies in the womb of a mother. And so, he's the only leader of a political party in Canada that's willing to open up that subject. So I really appreciate that as well.
Well, we didn't get to talk about, he brought up in his Tucker Carlson interview, the New World Order. Like, what leader in Canada is talking about the New World Order and the problem that you should be, because we're not dumb. We see exactly what's happening with the globalists and the elites and everyone singing out the same song sheet across the globe. So we understand that something's going on. I love that he was able to have that discussion, talked about what of a threat it is, how the PPC would counter it or conquer it. It'll be interesting to see what happens. You and I, Alan, have said it before. I don't know if the majority of Canadians understand the trouble that Canada's in. And I think we might have to experience a little more pain before more eyes are open to make massive change. But of course, God's in control, right? We say it. We're going to do our foundational verse here. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. That verse is important because it lets you know that God created the world. He's in control. So God understands the situation that we're in right now. Right, Dad?
He does. Yeah, in Isaiah 54:18, it says, "For this is what the Lord says, God is the creator of the heavens. He formed the earth and made it. He established it. He did not create it to be empty, but formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh." I love that. And it was kind of too bad that we didn't get to interview him earlier on because there are been voting going on already, preliminary pre-voting. So if people hear our program and would have liked to have changed their vote, that's not going to happen. But hopefully people will look at this in a very serious way. And of course, if there's other leaders that want to be on our show, we'll try to get you on before the election. Just give us a call.
Well, I respect Grant Abraham, Maxime Bernier. These people are not afraid to come on and have the conversation. That's all we're asking. Just have the conversation. Pierre Poilievre, Carney, they're just sticking with the mainstream, lamestream media because they don't want to be challenged. We've already saw what happened when Rebel News or other independent media ask questions. They are not happy because they're not bought and paid for. Anyway, if you'd like to support our mission, keep this conversation on the air, we are viewer supported. We do not take governmental funds or private funds. If you'd like to support us, you can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate. There's many different ways digitally. You can give that way. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. You can make the check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stuart Green, Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H3C8. All your gifts are tax deductible, by the way. If you'd like to call our prayer line and ask for prayer, you can. 1-800-915-0056 is the number to call in Canada. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We will see you guys later.
Love you.